Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Rowan Neufeld. I'm the events coordinator for McNally Robinson Booksellers in Saskatoon. From this end, we're streaming live from Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Métis Nation, and the traditional lands of the Plains Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota. Welcome to the launch of Your Better Instincts, Uncover Your Inner Power to Improve Health, Happiness, and Performance by Dr. Stacy Irvine. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'd also like to thank Page 2 Books for working with us on tonight's event. Before I pass things along, I have a couple of brief Zoom housekeeping items. We've enabled live auto captions tonight, which you can access by clicking the live transcript button along the bottom of your screen. And we also have a Q&A box. So if you have questions, feel free to type those in that box as well. And hopefully we'll have some time to answer those later in the evening. So at this point, I'd like to make some introductions. We are joined, of course, by Dr. Stacy Irvine tonight, as well as her husband, Tim Irvine, who's going to facilitate a conversation about your better instincts. In 1995, Tim Irvine and his wife, Stacy, moved from the prairies where they grew up to Toronto with hopes of continuing their education at the doctorate level. And lucky for Tim, he fell into personal training where he and Stacy would soon become managers and co-owners of what would evolve into Totum. For Tim, it was a perfect blend of hands-on service and managing people. Fast forward to today, and Tim has taken his 20 plus years of industry experience, the many lessons of business ownership, and his passion for working with people to help Totum evolve into one of the fitness industry's most respected companies. And Dr. Stacy Irvine has worked in the health and fitness industry for most of her life, first as a coach dedicated to training athletes competing for provincial and national teams throughout Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario. And today, Dr. Irvine is the founder and co-owner of Totum Life Science and a regular health expert on Cityline and Breakfast Television. She is also a USask alumnus, holding a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology and a master's degree in Exercise Physiology. So we're pleased to have you both here tonight. I think first I'm going to pass things over to Tim. So welcome, Tim.
Oh. Thank you for having us. It's great to be here. We'd obviously love to be there in person instead. We're from Saskatoon originally, and as I was looking at the cover of the book, I'm sure that some of you are thinking, is that Stacy running on the Meewasin Trail beside the river? And I'm just going to say yes. She won't agree with that at all, but I'm moderating, so I'm going to say that. Even though it's not true. Anyway, great to be here. And again, thanks to McNally Robinson for setting this up. It's a real thrill and pleasure of ours. And I can tell you that, this whole book writing experience that Stacey's gone through has been a total labor of love. She's talked about writing a book for years and years. And she actually started before the pandemic. Pandemic might have given her a little bit more time. But in some ways it was harder at the same time because we had kids in the house. So it has been a lifetime in the making, and she's poured lots of passion, knowledge, and love into it. And I hope that those of you who have read it and those that will read it really get a lot out of it and enjoy it as much as I have. I guess we'll save the questions towards the end of the presentation. And in the meantime, we'll ask you to just get comfortable. I've got my fire going. I've got my pipe and my snifter of brandy. But I am a little bit hot because the fire is right here. So I'm just going to get a little bit more comfortable if you don't mind. Oh, yeah. Oh, geez, I forgot I was wearing my Husky jersey. Go Dogs, national semifinal this weekend, which we're really excited about. Anyways, Stace, I'll bring you into the conversation now. And I'm going to start with a general question. I haven't actually asked you some of these. Some of them I know the answer, but there's actually quite a few that in me preparing for this, I'm like, I actually don't know the answers to these. So that's probably a good thing for this whole process. So to start off, what was your motivation to write a book about instinct?
Okay, that's a great question. And thank you, Tim, and thank you, Rowan, for the great introduction. And most importantly, I want to say thanks to all of you who are on here tonight. And for those of you that, maybe couldn't make it, but you have friends and family that have purchased the book, thank you so much for that and for all of your support and all of your kind words about the book. I really appreciate it. And I'm, getting lots of enjoyment reading your messages through social media, and some of you are texting me, and it really is the best part of this whole process. Is in many ways the book reconnects me with a lot of people from my past, and that is mostly 100% people from Saskatchewan. And Tim and I have a huge affection for Saskatchewan and Saskatoon in particular. So we are both really enjoying this part of the journey with my book. So the journey with the book and the idea of instincts. It's a great question. And I think part of the answer lies in maybe a bit of frustration. You and I have worked in the fitness industry now for almost 30 years. And there's so much information and in fitness, and someone saying, do it this way and then do it the other way. And sometimes I find it tricky navigating all of that. And I wanted to, when I wrote this book, as you said, I've been thinking about it for a long time. I wanted to come up with a way that was based on science that would actually really help people make changes in their life and, try to lead a healthier lifestyle and a happier lifestyle. And so to me, instincts were the key, and they were also something that no one else had talked about before. And I found it a really interesting topic to research. So the book took about 3 years, and I would say probably almost the first year was research and trying to figure out, what role do instincts play on our behaviors and what drives us to do the things that we do. And then the other short answer of where did I get the idea? It was from our dog, Dallas, when she was a puppy, and I was out walking with her, and I realized that there were lots of things that she did that gave her a lot of joy were based on instincts. So on my many walks with Dallas was where the original idea for the book came together.
I do remember that. And you've been working in the fitness business for a long time. You're a chiropractor. So you're seeing both sides of it. You're seeing the fitness part and you're seeing the injury management part. What influence did your profession have on your concept of instinct? And we'll start with that.
I guess the experience really has highlighted for me that there's a lot of people struggling with these ideas. So I see that side of the picture regularly. I see people who are regularly injured or maybe not getting enough sleep or have, issues with their diet and what they're doing during the day. And I can see those results derailing their goals. But then I have another group, that we have these 85-year-old clients who are leading these really amazing, healthy lifestyles. And they're really enjoying themselves and they're staying active and fit. And I think that what I try to do is say, what's that group doing right versus the other group that is not getting the results that they want? And in many ways, then that becomes real life experience. And that's what I write about in the book. And that's what I talked about, with the high performers that are at the end of the book. Those, in my opinion, are the people who to get the results that they want.
Could you just repeat that last part? Because we just glitched out a little bit there.
Sure. So the interviews at the back of the book are, these very high performers, lots of very successful people, Chris Hadfield, Geddy Lee, Linda Reeves. And the reason I put those in there is because those people to me are, they've been able to put the pieces together in their life in a way that lets them get the results that they want.
Very good. Well, something you said there, I remember when we were in grad school together, you worked on that tri-generational bone density study, and something very similar to what you said right here about the instinct. You had the older generation, and do you think that experience kind of laid a little bit of foundation for what you're now experiencing in your practice and seeing people come through our door at Totum?
Without question. If you remember, in my study, it was at the University of Saskatchewan, I had two groups. And so it was men, and they were classified as elderly. So I believe and older in the group. And I had one group of very active men, and I had one group of inactive men. And I had to basically spend almost a half a day kind of with each subject, because we did a full nutrition analysis. Then we put them on the DEXA scanner to look at their bone density, and we looked at their activity levels. So it was a long questionnaire. So I noticed during the study, the active group that I had in were so much easier. And it was so, even the interviews and even getting them dressed and, onto the DEXA scanner, every single part of the study with the active group was at least 5 times easier than compared to the inactive group. And what I realized from that is that you can never stop being active. And I think at one point I said to you, you were studying elite triathletes, and I'd had a really tough day because I'd had a bunch of inactive subjects coming in, and it was really frustrating because even their train of thought with the questionnaires, everything was different with that group. And I said to you, it's such a great example to me of how I will never not be active in my life, if I can help it, because it has such a difference on so many different parts of your life.
Well, you had a pretty good background, looking at what your mom and dad did. They were always very active. And growing up on the farm, at least in your earlier years, and in part during high school. So how did the farm influence your concept of instinct?
Well, nature is a huge part of the book. And as part of the research, I wanted to figure out, why did my walks outside in the ravine with Dallas make me feel so good? A workout makes you feel good, but for some reason, being outside in nature and, spending time with Dallas, watching her run and chase squirrels made me feel even better. So I had more endorphins and probably more good hormones. My workout wasn't as hard as what I would normally do, but I came home always feeling so much better than I would when I left the house. And so I started researching that, and I realized that it's because you're in nature, and it has a lot of influence on your mood, on your critical thinking, and overall on your health. So trees will give off basically an aerosol that helps improve your immunity. And there's just so many things that we are seeing and hearing when we're in nature that are part of our makeup, from kind of essentially the beginning of humanity. And if we spend a lot of time ignoring those things, I think it's really detrimental to our health and overall to our well-being, and even in some ways to our performance and how we think and our happiness. And fundamentally, I remember growing up on the farm that I would leave the house first thing in the morning. My mom would call me in to come and eat lunch, and then I'd be outside again. and I would spend all day, every day outside. And I remember as a child growing up that is the lifestyle that I loved. I did not like coming, back into the city as much from the farm. I really always wanted to be outside. And I didn't understand, obviously, when I was younger, why that is, but I think that speaks to the importance of nature in our lives and why we should always be striving to be outside as much as we possibly can.
Well, and then you started talking about the dogs, and that was a bit of an influence for you about like their instinct. And, we live in Toronto, and you'd think of it as concrete jungle, which in some parts it is, but it has incredible ravine systems that are just kilometers and kilometers of parkland, one's close to us. So tell us, everybody, a little bit about watching the dogs in that environment.
So the ravine, as you said, it is absolutely beautiful. And I walk from the house in about 20 minutes. I go down a big hill and I'm in the ravine, and the ravine has, there's waterfalls, and there's essentially a creek running through it. It's absolutely beautiful. And because we have 4 gorgeous seasons here, you really appreciate that every day in the ravine is a little bit different. The really fun thing also that I find there's a sense of community. So most of us have a routine where we go walk our dogs at certain times of the day. And so then I see my regular friends and my regular dogs, and that's also very good for your mental well-being and for your overall health. So that part makes it incredibly enjoyable. The dogs absolutely love it. They love, kind of exploring through everything. They love seeing the other dogs that they know. We see deer in the ravine, and one day that stands out in particular, we were coming back, almost back home, and I was just leaving the ravine, and there were 3 coyotes over on the other side of the water, which was so wonderful because you feel safe. They're not coming over to see us or anything like that. And then as I watched them play, I noticed that their postures were exactly like our dogs' postures when they play. And it kind of clued into me that we're not so far removed from these things in nature as we might think that we are. And reconnecting with that part of your spirit is really essential to your well-being as a human. And I think it can have some wonderful impacts that in many ways we probably don't even understand yet. But I know that the way that I feel, as I said, when I leave versus the way I feel when I come back is completely different.
Yeah, that's great. So here's a big question for you, and this is in the most simplistic terms. So how are we fundamentally different now than we were 200 years ago, and obviously related to instinct?
The most important thing to realize is we came onto this planet as hunters and gatherers and foragers. And that meant that every day our body was designed that we would wake up and we would probably go outside immediately, and we would probably start looking for water and maybe some food. And the important part of that is that we were, number one, outside. We probably had a very good sleep because you would be going to sleep when the lights were turned out, and you'd be waking up when the lights were on. Now, this is probably a little bit past 200 years ago, but the concepts are the same. In the day, we were meant to eat food that came to us directly. So not processed, not added sugar, not added flour, colors, all the other additives and preservatives that we tend to consume now. We were meant to essentially kill our food, find our food, eat it that day, and not usually overeat, because the more you wanted to eat, the harder you had to work to get your food. So if you look at how we live today, it couldn't be further from that. We generally get up and we look at a screen first thing. We stay inside for a lot of our day. We don't move nearly as much. We sit for, again, a big portion of our day. Especially now with the pandemic, we don't have a lot of human connection with each other. So we tend to connect through our screens, through email, through phone calls, those types of things. And humans really weren't designed to live this way. So all you have to do is picture what we, when we first started out thousands of years ago, what we live like and what we live like today. And the health effects of how we live shouldn't be as shocking. And then I think we've made some amazing developments, obviously, in medicine and, dealing with things like bacteria and preserving our food and all those things. And some of those things are great. But when it gets too far away from what our bodies were designed to do, that's when I think we run into problems.
And so, we all have this survival instinct. Do you think that has been impacted at all? Again, comparing in modern times to 200 years ago?
I think that the survival instinct that we have now it's a similar thing, but we obviously worry about different things. And I would say that the pandemic and our climate are two obvious things that stand out, that those are causing an underlying stress for us regularly. And because our news comes to us on our devices, it's very hard for us to turn that information off. And again, we weren't designed to always have that stressful information coming to us. So if you picture a tribe of people living together, they would go out and they would do things together like hunt and get their food, but they'd also be socializing and they'd also be probably eating together and enjoying themselves together. But occasionally there'd be a threat. It might be a threats. And that's meant to be a temporary thing, a temporary stress, which you deal with. And then that stress is gone. And instead, because of these things, that stress comes to us all day long on a regular news feed. And because humans are designed to always attend to something that could be dangerous to us, we can't help ourselves. So if there's anything in the news that we think might be a threat, a pandemic, a climate event, we cannot turn our brains off to ignore that, because that is our survival instinct. We have to pay attention to it. And I believe that the news companies know that. And that's why a lot of times, even on a regular day with regular rain or snow coming, they try to make it a little bit sensationalized, because they know that if it feels threatening to you, you're going to pay attention, and it's really hard to turn that off.
Sure. And one of the things I've observed since you wrote this and kind of heightened my attention to instinct is this concept of, obviously there's fight or flight, and that's imminent danger. So something bad is about to happen or potentially happen, get out of there, right? Or fight it. When it seems like we're programmed for that much better than the long, slow problem that could be a death event or something very dramatic, but it's in the distance, whether a long time away or far away, so we don't really pay attention to it as much. Is that something that you think is actually a component of instinct, or how would you reconcile that? Because I think about you had mentioned the climate. We've heard enough about what's coming and the problems, but we don't seem to be trying to figure this out like as fast as possible.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the book, I do write about that. And the part to me with climate that is very worrisome is because how much I rely on nature and how important nature is to me. And I think that that's why I dedicated so much of the book to that. Is I hope that if I can encourage more people to spend more time in nature, then we will all start to care a little bit more about it and about what's happening to it. So that's one piece. And I agree with you. I've had many situations in the ravine where there's a fight or flight response. So a huge dog is off leash, running at my dogs, or, you know, a coyote's running down the path at you. And it is an interesting, be in big trouble, and then the threat goes away and you get on with your day. And I do think that those types of stresses can be good, provided they're brief and provided you feel supported. The chronic stress that never leaves you, or the chronic worrying that you're not able to deal with properly, and maybe you don't have those community connections or supports or family connections or supports that help you deal with those things. Those are the chronic stresses that we know without a doubt, scientific research has proven, will be very detrimental to your health in the long term. And, you know, those are the things that give you chronic high blood pressure, which we also know is really detrimental for a lot of your body systems. So, yeah, so the chronic stress is not something that we were designed for, I don't believe. And I don't believe that we have instincts to help us properly deal with that chronic stress, because things just weren't laid out that way, and they were not supposed to be that way.
Yeah, that's interesting, because evolutionary processes dictate that that's not we're not going to fix that in the next 5 years. That's like a, you know, thousands of years sort of process to develop those types of instincts. And let's hope that we make it that far. So specific question for you. You quoted Mark S. Bloomberg and his description of really around the current views about what instinct is. And one of the things he mentioned in your quote was, we're not necessarily hardwired or genetically predetermined with respect to instinct on things. Because you think, okay, well, you know, a certain type of dog herds animals because that's just what they do, right? They're hardwired. It's their genetics. And what he talks about is the instincts are actually developed. They're species specific experiences. And was that surprising to you to discover that?
It wasn't surprising, and it was what I hoped for, because thinking about the book, the goal of the book is, number one, understand your instincts, and then number two, figure out how to use them to make your life better. So if in all the research I'd found out that your instincts are completely hardwired and there's nothing you can do about them, then it would be a point of, okay, why am I writing the book? There's no way we can change any of these things. I love that definition, and I agree with it 100%. And in the chapter that talks about movement, I think that that's one of the best illustrations of why and how an instinct is changeable. And the example of born with an instinct to run, and we all have that pattern in our brain. But he took that pattern and went over it again and again and again and again until he became one of the fastest runners in the world. You had an instinct in your arm how to throw a football. And we all have that instinct of how to throw something. And you took that instinct and turned it into, you know, your husky experience by practicing throwing again and again and again. I view a lot of the instincts the same way.
And the multi-year NFL career that I had. I think I did.
I think they're going to call you.
Oh yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, it's coming.
It's coming.
Or CFL career, you know, sorry. Just, I was trying to go to the biggest stage, you know, envision the Super Bowl.
Right.
So yeah, so that I love that definition as well, because it gives us hope. You know, I'm curious about two things. How did our society get to this state when basically what it feels like to me is we've been developing bad instincts for the last, call it 100, 150 years. And so that's part A. Part B is, where do we go from here?
Yeah, okay, that's a tough question. And I just wanted to make a statement too. Tim has a lot of questions, obviously, but if any of you want to ask any questions, please put them in the chat, or, I've got the chat up right here. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And we also have a Q&A, but if it's easiest for you, just write them in the chat.
Okay, I just found the Q&A. Sorry, I didn't see that. Okay, so yes. You actually beat me to it by just a little bit, because I was just about, we're at a half an hour. I was just about to say, we're going to take some questions, and okay, well, good for you.
Okay, so
feel free to put questions in the Q&A. I'll pay attention to it. And then if you can answer that question, Stace. Yes,
or put it in the chat too, because I've got the chat up. So if there's any comments or questions, comments are great too. Because I do want to make sure that we have time to answer your questions. Okay, your question, Tim, to go back to it, was we've been so living so long one way, is that kind of, and how do we get to go back to the other way or a better way, right?
Yeah, like our instincts have devolved to where they are right now.
Right.
How do we get here, and how do we get back to, listening to our instincts?
Okay, so this is the really interesting piece, is if you took a chart of human beings, let's say that space of time up until the Industrial Revolution is that, says my connection's unstable.
Okay. Yeah, you glitch out a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm okay. I can understand.
Okay.
I can pick up the theme.
Okay. So let's say that section of life prior to the Industrial Revolution is this big. And then let's take where we are right now, Industrial Revolution into computers and the way that we live right now. It's about that big. Now, if you think about it that way, I do believe that that's why we're having so many problems with our health today. So I think that during the Industrial Revolution, there were some problems that we had with chemicals and with mining and things like that were big problems, pneumonia, things that we recognized and we dealt with. But what's happening today, and this is more recent, is that our life expectancy is shorter. So it's going in the other direction. And the population is dying more from diseases, what they call diseases of despair. So that means suicide, depression, drug overdose, chronic disorders, and things that are definitely impacted by how we live. And maybe kind of indulging in lifestyles that aren't the best for our health, and especially when we think about our mental health. So when you say, how do we get back to it? The whole premise of the book is, if you understand that you were hardwired for these things. So if you understand that you're hardwired to be outside every day, if you understand that you're hardwired to exercise or move some way every day, if you understand that you're hardwired to always have, the best human connections that you have possible to you, and just to keep working on nurturing those human connections. If you understand these things, that they're within you and they've always been within you, and by enhancing them, you're going to be healthier, you're going to perform better, and you're going to be happier. I think that knowledge is very powerful in that way. And so that's why in the book, I outlined all these instincts that have an impact on our health and on our happiness and on our performance. And I think that if you understand that, it will help you really honor them a bit more and maybe get back to a way.
Okay. That's interesting. So I've got one more specific question, then I want to get to some of those health questions, because I think that that's something that we can maybe deal with right now ourselves individually. So, but before I do that, in chapter 4, you write about working with or against our instincts. So for the audience, what does that look like in real terms, like in their life terms? Like, what on a day-to-day basis, how am I working with my instincts? How am I working against my instincts?
Okay, that's a great question. So in Toronto, we have, let's say we have an apartment, huge apartment complex with a shopping center in it, some great restaurants in it, and it is located at Bay and Bloor. You can live there, you can eat there, there's a drugstore, there's a grocery store, and you can go straight from your elevator in your apartment. You can go downstairs and you can hop on the subway and you could go to a job downtown, and you could do the same thing. You could go up to your office tower and you could go to work and sit at your computer, and you would never actually have to set foot outside. So you could completely live your life inside with a big chunk of it being underground. And I've treated people in the clinic that have done this. And we can all understand what eventually might happen from a lifestyle like that you would eventually probably your sleep would get disrupted because you're never outside. So your awareness of, what time of day it is not very good. You're not ever getting any fresh air. You're not getting a lot of movement because you are, you're just going to the subway, going to work. You're probably eating maybe lots of processed food because, you're down in the food courts there. So that would be an exact example of a person living a life that is not really honoring their instincts. Then let's take the other extreme. You live on a farm in a small community. So the first thing you do when you get up is you go outside, you check on your animals, maybe that you have, or, maybe you just have a dog, but either way, you're probably walking outside. You have a garden, so you're eating fresh produce. You're very aware of the weather because you are growing things. The weather is very important to your day-to-day activities. And hopefully you go into a town where everyone in the town, because it's a small town, and I grew up like this, you really friends in your community because that's where you live and those are the people who support you. And I probably just froze there. Okay. And that type of a lifestyle involves a lot more movement, a lot more outdoor time, a lot more quality human connection. And that type of a lifestyle is much more in line with honoring your instincts than the first lifestyle.
Makes a ton of sense. So on that same note, so just moving to some health related questions, but I think this one fits exactly the same with respect to the example that you gave. It's all about sleep. So, you talk about rest and recovery in the book, and sleep is obviously a really important part of rest and recovery. And it seems to be one of those things that we have demonized, that, getting proper amounts of sleep is for the weak. You want to sleep less, work more, get more accomplished, those sorts of things. So, we know how important it is. How do we mess it up so bad?
It's a great question. Okay, so I have a question in the chat that deals with this.
Okay.
And it's from Chad Fike, my brother. Hi, Chad. That's so nice that you came on here. Wonderful. Okay, so here's the question. Hi, Stacy. To what extent does proper sleep, rest, mental health, etc., allow us to follow our natural instincts? Meaning, we want to exercise and get outside, but we do not seem to have the energy to do so. Okay, so that's exactly what you're talking about, Tim and Chad. This is a fantastic question, which really is the fundamental piece to a lot of what I'm talking about in the book. I always say this to my patients. I say this to the, even the high performance athletes that we work with. A good workout starts the night before the workout with a good night's sleep. A good night's sleep is essential to every single thing that we're talking about. And I truly believe that without a good night's sleep, you're really not going to accomplish many of the other goals and ideas and concepts that I talk about in the book. The sleep is up here. The other things are down a little bit lower. So sleep is crucial. How did we mess it up so much? Well, that's a great point, that we did mess it up. And most of you can probably figure out how and why we messed it up. Number one was the invention of the light bulb. And I talk about that in the book, and I talk about, what year that happened. To interrupt our sleep, and we were able to interrupt our natural patterns of sleep. And things essentially went downhill from there. But we are at a whole other level now, because we don't just have light bulbs, we have these devices where at nighttime, lots of us shine them right into our eyes. So then what do we do to fix this? I think you go to the and, you make sure that at say an hour before you're going to bed, you start turning lights down, you get off your devices. And then many of us can probably picture this. Tim, you used to work in landscaping. I bet you on the days when you got up really early and were outside all day long working manual labor, so you're moving all day, you probably found that it was really easy to get to sleep at the end of the day. And many of us have had those same experiences. I picture like a ski trip. So a ski trip is another great example. You usually would get up early, you'd be outside all day long skiing. And then we would joke, I remember going with friends and we joked that none of us could stay awake at the end of the night to do anything because we just needed to pass out and go to sleep. So if you look at a day like that, a day where you're outside doing manual labor all day, or a day where you're gardening, or a day where you're working on your landscape and you're actually a little bit active all day, I really truly believe that that is kind of an ultimate day to have a great night of sleep. Because you've done everything right, you've honored your instincts, you've been outside, you've been in nature, you've watched the sun come up and you've watched the sun come down, and there's hormones that'll be released in your brain when the sun comes down. Not to mention that low level of activity all day produces other hormones that tell your brain, okay, now you have to rest, because your brain thinks you might want to do it again the next day, which is fantastic. And those are the nights when you're going to have an awesome sleep. Now, I realize we can't all do that and we can't live our lives that way. But if you take pieces from that, so maybe it's getting up and doing a walk early, and then making sure at about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, you do turn out the lights and you do turn off your devices. So you're not having that light come in and interfere with your hormones. It is so crucially important. It's the biggest first step in the book. It's called Chapter on Rest and Recovery, and it's all dedicated to these techniques and what we need to do to be able to have a good night's sleep.
Yeah, and a perfect example of that is most of you who have been following Stacy know that we've got an Airstream trailer. We keep it up north here in Ontario. And the times that I go up there by myself, because I might have to do something or whatever else, I remember distinctly in late September being up there by myself, and it's getting dark fairly early, and I'm like, oh well, I should just go to bed because it's got to be 10 o'clock, and it was like 8:30. But I had the thought, and then I thought briefly, oh well, then I should stay up because it's only 8:30. But then I said, okay, well, I just have to listen to my instinct because it didn't matter what time it was. My brain said, time to go to bed. And so I decided, instead of leaving the lights on and whatever else, to actually follow the instinct and go to sleep. And it was a spectacular sleep. And, I got up earlier than I normally would, but that was fine as well, because you get the sunrise and whatever else. So that's a perfect example of it. Just so everybody knows, and this is a little bit of Totum promotion, tomorrow we have a new blog post coming out about sleep. And you can get tons of information on the internet. If you just Google sleep hygiene, you will get all the basics of how to set yourself up and your environment for good sleep. This article is more about some facts around what a good sleep does for you and what a bad sleep does for you. And I find that sort of thing really compelling, because that changes motivation a little bit. If you read it and you kind of understand, and maybe something strikes a chord with you, that might shift what you want to do and taking on a habit. So that's up totum.ca, Totum.ca. And then right at the bottom of the homepage, you'll see the word blog, and you just click on that. Anyway, moving on to another health related question. So Stace, how do you think our mental health has suffered because we've ignored our instincts?
It's a great question. It's complicated because mental health is, well, first of all, it's something I'm not an expert in. I do see it a lot, though, in my practice and in what we do. And I really believe that when you look at the health of our population in general, and one of the main reasons I wrote the book this way is that there are many discouraging trends and, things happening in our society that are sad. And just to give you audiences know this, is that we had so many teen suicides just within our neighborhood. And nothing speaks more to me that as a society, we're not doing the best we can with mental health when you have teenagers with their whole life ahead of them, suffering from all kinds of depression and to the point where they take their own lives. So I don't think that we're doing really great right now with our mental health. The only bright spot I see is that finally we're talking about it. And finally, it's becoming a part of our day-to-day conversation. I hear my kids use words that are really interesting. They'll say like, that triggers me, or, they have a great vocabulary about mental health. So I think that the awareness is there. However, if you live a life where you're robbing yourself of sleep and you're not getting enough movement in your day, and you're sitting for 10 hours a day, you're not eating well, so you're eating food that's nutrient deficient, I really think it's an insurmountable challenge to think that you're going to have good mental health with a bunch of unhealthy lifestyle habits. I truly believe that the two things are completely intertwined. And I think that there's a lot of tips in the book about how instincts and mental health are related to each other. One of the most important findings in the area of mental health that I saw was there's a great study called the Harvard Men Study, and there's a TED Talk about it too. It's fantastic. It follows two groups of men, one who went to Harvard and one who went to school in kind of inner city Boston. And they followed these men all the way through their life from graduation into their late 80s. And some of them have passed away now. And they measured all kinds of health variables. So blood pressure, incidence of heart disease, cancer, all these types of things. And what they were looking for was what would predict happiness and health in our later years. And what they assumed was that the men who went to Harvard would probably have better health outcomes because of their education and because they probably maybe had jobs that they enjoyed or whatever. The standout fact and the standout influence on all variables of health was the quality of their closest relationships. So it wasn't their education, it wasn't strong relationships with one or two other people in their lives. So whether it be a spouse or a good friend or something like that. And if you think about that, that's the biggest determinant of overall health. And to me, that is a really good example of how our mental health impacts our physical health. So to me, the two are directly related and they are tied to your instincts.
Great, thanks, Stace. So we got about 5 minutes left. I've got a question in the chat from Barb Fuchs. Barb, say hi to your brother for me. He's awesome. He's one of my favorite people in the world. The question is, what is your advice about avoiding the chronic stress that occurs from all the negative news that we're bombarded with on a daily basis, especially at the moment, which, by the way, when you talk about our society, so 100 years ago, we didn't have that. There was no, well, I guess 100 years ago, was radio even on? I don't even think it was. But newspapers were, but you had to wait. When did you get a weekly newspaper? So you didn't have to worry about negative news from anywhere, but now it's everywhere. So Stace, what do you think?
I love this question, Barb. Thank you. And I could not agree more that this is a real problem. And it goes back to our survival instincts that we talked about. And the news companies and the media companies know this 100%, that if they make something, statement that makes you a little bit afraid, you have a really hard time tuning it out. This point that you're making, Barb, also goes to why we want to understand our instincts a little bit more. So I'll give you an exact example. So I hear a crazy story in the news that upsets me. You know, a good example would be what's happening right now in British Columbia. And I'm watching, you know, cows and all these animals and all these people being stranded, and it's heartbreaking. But the problem is I'm not seeing it once, you know, it's a constant newsreel and the images just come back to you over and over and over again. And each time when I said my kids use the word triggered, that is what that does to you. It's a triggering response. And I really think it's important to, first of all, understand that that is your instinct and that's why you're tuning into it. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that is part of being a human being. Now, when you understand it and you understand that if you hear it, you really can't turn it off, you have to figure out a way to manually turn it off. So you all that stuff off. It's really crucial to have a break.
Okay, you glitched, a big glitch there, but I think we got the point. Take a break from that, that sort of information. Just get rid of it. So I've got one more question. Please feel free to put any additional questions in the chat. So my last question for you is, what type of instinct did you have that drew you to your husband initially? Like, I know a lot of people are shaking their heads, like they're like, well, she didn't have very good instincts. Other people are like, she clearly had good instincts. So I'm wondering which side of that do you think you fall on?
Okay, I'm going to say good instincts.
It's only one answer.
I'm going to say it was part of my better instincts that drew me to you. And I'm sure a lot of people who are on this chat with us would agree 100%.
Very, very nice. Great answer, Stacy. That's a tough question. And So Rowan, I don't know if you want to come back on now. And if there are any further questions, I can't see anything in the chat. Let me just check the Q&A. Nothing in the Q&A as well. So I've got more questions if we should continue on, but Rowan, you tell us.
Well, what do we think? Maybe that's a good spot to wrap up. And on a high note.
End on something about Tim.
Oh no. Well,
I'm totally good with it. He did a good job tonight. We'll
That's my instinct. I can't help it.
Yeah.
You asked me to do it. There's a camera on. It's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
okay.
It's
Well,
perfect.
okay.
It's perfect.
Clearly not the only high point of the evening, which of course is talking about your book, Your Better Instincts, which is available online and in store at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And of course, thanks to Madison at Page 2 Books. And huge thanks to Stacy Irvine for being with us tonight virtually. Hopefully, if there's another book, you'll be able to launch it in person. And thanks as well to our host, Tim Irvine. So have a great rest of the evening, everybody. Stay warm and don't forget to pick up a copy of Your Better Instincts. Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Rowan. Thanks, McNally Robinson. I'm not even going to wait till the next book, just so you know. I'm going to come there and we're going to do more fun stuff about this book. So stay tuned, everyone that's on. I promise I'll come and something fun together in person are the most important ones. So I'm going to make that work for you.